Okay, so my article, it was about the education of the American students. They compare and contrast data recorded in recent years before COVID-19, and they also state good points when there are faults in the education system that are not suited for the American students. So a source from the U.S. Department of Education, Institute of Education Sciences, National Center for Education Statistics, and National Assessment of Educational Projects. The scores for science among Native American students in the decade of 2009 to 2019 show almost no progress. Even as the population for those who identify as Native American, Alaska Native, has nearly doubled from 5.2 million in 2010 to 9.7 million in 2020, in which 30% of those people are children. So even if the population has doubled in 2019, only 29% of Native American high school seniors have fully completed their course studies for science studies. So courses like biology and ecology. And a quote from Montoya Whiteman, who is a marketing and outreach director of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. She says what she thinks of how the pandemic and virtual learning has affected the American students. She says, I think that the digital divide has always kind of been there for Indian country and Indian communities. The pandemic just really kind of exacerbated that situation. A lot of these schools don't have the budget for it, and there's maybe not even awareness of the types of teaching tools out there that they can use for science. One fault that they point out for Native American learning is the lack of experienced teachers. There are not enough Native American teachers, and the teachers of other ethnicities don't know how to work with the Native American students, as they're teaching are for more Western education. If an indigenous student wanted to go to a public school for better education in STEM, they're very underrepresented in STEM. And this could lead to the student feeling like they don't belong there or they're not being included. The solution that they provided in the article is having more cross-subject projects that include the tribal's history and lore and their culture, and then including them in lessons for ecology or math lessons. I think that there are many opportunities that can come from both virtual learning and in person. So you might have more educational opportunities in virtual learning, but also in person adds that connection to people. So, what if they, just a solution where they combine virtual learning and just include that in the class. And that's my article.
Bowen is next. I'm not sure if they're on Zoom.
Hi, Bowen. Do you want to give us your summary?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, have you started?
Okay, I got it. I was looking for it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In Iran, they looked at how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the learning from in-person to virtual. They found that virtual learning has some benefits such as being able to participate online from anywhere at any time, immediate scores on tests, and much more flexibility for students and families. The article lists out the main challenges in Iran. 1. Complex cultural and social context. 2. Teachers not being prepared for virtual teaching. 3. Lack of access to infrastructure and equipment. Willingness to hold in-person classes. Impossibility of using mobile-based training for all age groups. Lack of access to smartphones. Poor technology ability. All classes can't be made to fit virtual. And large number of learners and the limited time to prepare online courses. Out of all these, I think number 3 is the most applicable to the situation on Indian reservations. I know where I am from, Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Montana, a lot of households don't have internet and cell phone coverage is spotty. Also, lots of kids don't have access to computers and the schools have a hard time getting laptops for students. Even though the article is about Iran, the internet thing is true on Indian reservations.
Thank you.
Okay, my article was titled Academic Persistence Among Native American High School Students. This article is a qualitative research that focused on Native American persistence in graduating high school. 12 Native American students affiliated with the Navajo, Apache, and other correlating tribes from 2 rural secondary schools located near the reservation participated in providing information to identify factors that detract, I'm sorry, it's really hard to read off a phone. Detract students' efforts to graduate. The first influence found was lack of family support. Some of the students in the articles expressed how they have received discouragement from family members, which makes sense why no one would be motivated to go to school. This also causes issues for peers. A student described how he was lucky to have 2 parents, but realized that peers didn't have that same guidance and caused them to distance themselves. The student says, and I quote, "I'm lucky because my parents aren't into drugs and alcohol, kind of why I don't hang out with a lot of Native kids," end quote. This brings up another issue why students could be struggling in school, which is drugs. But this was not focused in the article, but is another issue to be kept in mind when speaking on students and education. The third factor is racism. Quote straight from the article, it says, "Racially oppressive experiences of Native American are still prevalent in that these students experience prejudice that other minorities have begun to overcome." I feel like racism is experienced by Native American, I feel like racism experienced by Native American is not very well known. It's not like, I guess, the light isn't shined upon like racism that Native Americans experience for some reason. I don't know why. It is received by both fellow natives with similar background and people of other race. A student mentioned an example of intertribal racism. The student said that he was not a full member and felt that they have let their teacher down because the teacher had thought that the student was born and raised in the reservation. The teacher spoke about how the student could potentially be a chairman, but their expectations were lowered because they had found out that the student was not fully native. Another student expressed that it was hard for them to participate in Native American clubs because she had a unique cultural background. It was hard for her to help other students to understand that she has her own language and not everyone is like the same, from the same tribe. It was identified that Native American dropout rates are impacted by school level and individual level influences. Things that could help these issues are maintaining faculty support. Some students have gained faculty support and receive a form of comfort from the faculty. Another couple of solutions include extended family structure to provide support and a sense of belonging, and structured college preparation programs that focus on scholarship opportunities specifically for Native American students. And I'd like to end with a quote from the article. It says that the history and past and current treatment of Native Americans in educational entities in the U.S. has created a unique cultural background for those of this ethnicity, which has trickled down through generations of both students and educators. End of quote.
Bree?
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Remote learning can be very difficult for students all across the country, but for some Native American students, it can be more difficult depending on their circumstances. For example, some students don't have internet access, transportation, electricity, etc. Because of these circumstances, for example, students that live on the reservation, most of the time they don't have or have limited access to internet or electricity, which makes it difficult to get their education from home, especially with COVID-19 pandemic going on, and some states are strictly remote. With transportation, they would be able to get internet access to the public library or maybe even a coffee shop, but even that can be difficult. So let's say that your mom or grandma or whoever takes care of you several other children to take care of as well. It would be kind of hard to get where you need to go when there are other children's needs too. These types of situations can even be hard on the staff and teachers. If teachers or instructors don't have a proper way to communicate with each of their students, how will they get them to succeed and get the right education and necessities to help them learn or do better? In this article that I came across called the Young Living Foundation, Heart of America, it mentioned nonprofit organization Heart of America, or HOA, has distributed critical resources to Navajo students and families. This includes school and art supplies, books, games, and they have also given what is called education and solar home kits to those that don't have electricity. It powers their electronic devices, lights, and some small home appliances. The HOA had also provided 100 Chromebooks to one of the school districts in San Juan. Now, I'm not completely sure if this is nationwide or if it's just based on a certain county, but it is a great idea to start or to help Native American students succeed. Also, I have learned that the HOA has given 1,000 of these distance learning packs to offset the challenges of learning on a reservation. In my opinion, I can agree with it being more difficult than usual to do distance learning while living on the reservation. I know this because of when I lived out on my ranch outside of a reservation and did my sophomore and junior year of high school remote. There wasn't very adequate internet connection, and you never know when it's going to get spotty. For example, if you're trying to get an assignment, it can be difficult if you're trying to get an assignment done on time, but your Wi-Fi or electricity goes out every so often, and you end up not being able to turn it in because of it. Or if you're on Zoom and you keep getting kicked out for unstable internet connection, you'd be missing majority of the lesson, and the majority of the lesson could have been very useful for you in future assignments, projects, homework, questions that need clarification.
Okay, did you do any definitions?
We have the words, but not the definition.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. And group, the next group, please take the table. Thanks, you guys. So Tracy, Alara, Leland, and Kaylee. So I have 4 summaries I think I read this morning. Nice group efforts. Those videos do not lie. So if you ever have a chance to go into those videos I posted in the classroom, you can see what others have done. I was pretty happy about it compared to last semester when I was. Okay, take a moment, regroup. And so Tracy, Leland, Kaylee, Alara, who else do I have in there? Oh, Sebastian. He's always on my second page. I never get English for him. That's such a daddy.